Welcome to the Money Focus Podcast. I'm your host, Moses the Mentor. And in today's exciting episode, I'm going to welcome James Nelson to the show, who's a visionary leader and author. He's also the co-founder and CEO of Global Leadership Solutions. And James has dedicated himself to empowering emerging leaders. And we're going to dive into his book, The 6 C's of Leadership, and uncover the secrets to successful team building. So stay tuned. All right, James. So I appreciate you joining me on the Money Focus podcast. I want to take the time to start off the podcast show with just talking about your career journey, your leadership journey, and ultimately how you ended up starting your business. So I want to give you the floor to, get us started with that.
Well, first of all, Moses, I appreciate you reaching out to me, man. And just to talk about leadership, that's something that I'm passionate about, something that I think it's necessary. I believe that everything rises and falls on leadership. As you said, my leadership journey, it started a few decades ago, graduating college. And one of the things that I kept hearing when I graduated was that I wanted to be in management. I wanted to be in leadership, but I just didn't have any leadership experience being a full-time student athlete. And so for me, my journey was starting at that entry level. How do I make my way and navigate to get to where it was I was trying to go in terms of my career development? I knew I needed to get experience, but I knew I also needed to add value at the same time. And so that's where I just started to figure out. I'm watching other leaders. I had a mentor that was a supervisor that I talked to about in terms of what does it take to become a leader? How do you get to the next level? And so from there, man, I applied for a leadership development program. The company that I was working with happened to have one, and it was a 90-day program. And so it gave me just some foundational things that I needed to figure out how to become a supervisor in a call center environment. And so from there, I just continued to develop, grow, focus, read, execute the things that I was given by my mentor to do.
I'm Moses the Mentor, so I definitely want to give shout out to that because I feel like mentorship is huge. Having the right mentor could really set you up for your career, professionally, personally. So, talk to us a little bit more about your mentor. Like, how did you establish that relationship? Was it something that you initiated, or did that person actually see some potential in you?
Miss Ruby Lamonte, she was my first supervisor. Like I said, when I took that entry level job, I think it's a little bit of both. I saw the way she moved. She was mature. She was a great coach. But I also think she saw something in me because even before I became a supervisor, I would be walking into the office. I'd have a briefcase. I'm not a supervisor, but I'm walking and talking like I'm in management or leadership. And I think she saw that I was committed to growth and development. And so she kind of pulled me to the side and just started to give me the game on how I needed to get to the next level and really prep me for that leadership development program. So she just kept it 100 with me. She told me where I was missing it. She told me where I needed to make some adjustments. And so I just listened. I took that advice and I made those adjustments. It worked out.
One of the things as a mentee that you have to do, you have to be that sponge. And you have to really make sure that mentor, that person that's valuable in your career, that you're taking the time to apply the knowledge that person is bestowing upon you. Because, when someone is a highly sought mentor, you got to take advantage of that time. So it sounded
Right.
like she was someone that was really walking the walk, and people were able to see her just really go about her day-to-day business. And it sounds like you took heed to that and was applying it every day that you came to work. You were being a leader regardless of title. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
and leadership is not about title, right? It's not about that, right? And so I purpose to be coachable, right? Being a former athlete, I understood how important it was to be coachable. And so I took feedback as a gift. I didn't take it personally. I didn't have a chip on my shoulder. If there was correction that was being brought, I received it, right? And I learned early on to, as they say, take the meat, spit out the bone. Don't choke on all of the stuff, right, that you're being shared. You may not agree with everything, but there is something in that feedback or that coaching that is there to help you. And you've got to know the difference when someone's trying to help you versus stop you and harm you from getting to where you're trying to go. And that wasn't the case with the mentors that I had.
Obviously, that's early in your career. Talk to us some of those career milestones that you had that you were really proud of that
And
ultimately led you to you starting your own business.
part of the process, right? I can say that my early lessons was just really learning how to transition from being a peer to a boss or manager or supervisor. Oftentimes, new leaders struggle with. Last week we were sitting side by side, but this week I've been promoted and I'm actually in management now, and so being able to navigate from that frontline or entry level or peer position into being a supervisor. Because we all know frontline employees talk about management, and you may have been earshot of what was being said, but you got to be very careful about that, because if you're aspiring to get to that next level, you're going to become one of them soon enough. So for me, the early lessons were how to really draw that line, right? Without compromising your integrity, your character. I always prided myself on not stepping on anyone to get to the next level. You know what I mean? And so I made sure that I focused on the people at every level. And so as I went from a supervisor to a manager to assistant manager, associate director, I always kept my focus on the people. And as long as you do that, you'll have success.
Peer perception is powerful when you grow in your career. A lot of people just say,
Mhm.
well, you know what, as long as the leaders love me and everything like that. But just like you mentioned, that a lot of conversations I had about leaders when you're in the IC position, you want to make sure that former peers, when you get promoted, that they say, okay, well, yeah, I'm happy for James. I think James
Right,
is the right person. And I think really without taking away you being authentic and just being human, what's worked for me is that you just be solutions driven.
right,
It's a new policy that comes out.
mhm,
You get it off your chest. Hey, this is not the best policy I would go with, but let's figure out how we can make it work.
right.
Because people can respect that if you focus on the solution and not just the problem. So that's just what's worked for me. But I know we're going to
No,
talk
no,
more about your
no,
leadership.
no. Listen, you're right on in terms of being solution oriented, right?
Mhm.
And I still, even at my level, have to, because you got to be able to deliver the message. And I have this philosophy where we can have constructive dissent. We don't have to agree on everything, right? We don't have to, because we won't. We're human. But I share with my leaders that it's okay to have constructive dissent. But once we agree upon a course of action and why we're taking the steps, and I'm big on explaining why, I'm big on helping people to understand the big picture. Hey, we're not just doing this just because we're doing it for this reason. And guess what? We might not even agree that that is the right approach. But once we've made a decision, we go down that path, right? Not to sabotage it, but to embrace it and do everything that we can to try to implement and execute it to the best of our ability. Yeah, I agree with you that you've got to be able to say, hey, I may not agree with this wholeheartedly, but this is what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Let's band together and figure out, how do we solve it? How do we make it better? How do we make it work, for us and for the company?
So, how has your personal leadership philosophy evolved over your career?
So I've been pretty consistent around my philosophy. Everywhere that I've been, every company that I've worked for, anybody that's worked with me will say the same thing about me, that I am passionate about developing and building people. And so my philosophy always starts with, what's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish? And then making sure that the people understand what their role is in it. And as long as I'm communicating clearly and effectively in terms of what the what's and the whys behind it, I've gained buy-in in most cases. And so I try to be transparent. I don't try to be. I am transparent and honest. I'm a straight shooter. And I don't know if this is just my nature and makeup, but I've always been that way. Even when I was a young leader, I just have a way of explaining things to people to where they understand, directionally why we're doing what we're doing. And that's not me being just a company guy, right? You know what I mean? I can disagree with kind of a strategy, but still find the value in at least moving forward in this direction without trying to sabotage it. So my philosophy has always been people first, because leadership is all about people or influence, but it's also about people.
So, what inspired you to start your company?
Man, just my journey and seeing how even as I transitioned and was promoted from position to position, a lot of companies don't really have strong leadership development programs. They really don't. They say they do. And right now, there's a lot of online learning. Hey, go take this course, go take that course. But there's no real meat and potatoes of what it means to be a leader. And I'll give you a couple of facts, right? Data, stats, right? 69% of millennials, and I really focus on being next generation leaders, right? So 69% of millennials feel that there's a lack of leadership development in the workplace. They just don't feel like it's happening in the workplace. 79% of people will quit their job because of lack of appreciation from leadership, right? It's interesting because over 80% of companies recognize that there needs to be a strong integrated leadership development at all levels, but only really about 5% of them have real robust leadership development. You know what it is, right? It's like you get promoted, go. Sink or swim. That's not real strong, comprehensive. When you get on, they expect you because you were good at the job. You may have been the top seller, the top performer. You had all of the product knowledge. Not saying you, but hey, Moses is probably the next one up because he's a go-to for all of the employees if they have questions about the system, about a customer, about escalations. But no one has equipped Moses to get promoted and now lead people. And you have a lot of leaders that are new to the role, that they're functioning as if they were an individual contributor instead of now learning how to lead. So that was part of the reason why a Global Leadership Solutions was founded for me, because I want to help the next generation of leaders. And quite frankly, they're asking for it and they need it. And the workforce is changing dynamically. And so we can't forget about the importance of development.
I think that's a great cause. I've seen it. I've seen great leadership development in certain roles I've
Yes.
been in, and then I've also seen bad. It's really bad. And the thing that you noted is that companies, they all say that they do it,
Mhm.
right? Because I think it's just a buzzword just to be like, yeah, we have great leadership development. No one measures it. No one really is brave enough to really challenge it because it's
Right.
like, hey, we brought this person in. But realistically, it's not really implemented on a day to day because really it's all about just task driven, heads
Yes.
down, getting the work done. And they move these people who are high performers, like you noted, into these leadership positions because they tell them that your path to career success is determined by you being in this leadership role.
Right.
But just because you were great as an IC doesn't necessarily mean you'll be a great leader.
That that
It's that's what unfortunately senior leaders in a lot of companies feel that way, and it's just not the case. If you can't develop more James Nelsons,
right.
you know what I'm saying? Like, then you're not really a leader.
It's funny you say that because a lot of the same senior leaders went up through the ranks and they know it's true. Oftentimes, you can easily get sucked into the task and checking things off the box. Here are all of the things that you need to do as a leader. You got to this report, that report, coach this, coach that. But in terms of how you really do that effectively, sometimes is missed in the development process. And a lot of leadership onboarding programs are not all that great, especially if you're coming externally. They expect you to come with some leadership acumen, but it's different. It's a totally different company. I don't know everything about this organization. So there's got to be a little bit more to it than just you got the keys, now go drive.
Do you think it's just because you said a point there, and I mean, you work with these senior leaders more than I have. Do you think it's just easier to just promote people? Because I would think it's just a harder conversation to tell someone who's a high performer that, hey, you're great, but you're not a leader. Is it just easier for them to be like, hey, you know what? You've been superior every year. Let's go ahead and just promote you. Or do you think they take an easy way out, or are they
I'm
just oblivious of
Listen,
the
man, I think
culture?
they're taking the easy way out because people don't want to have the difficult conversations.
Conversation.
Um, you could be a great performer. I just had a conversation like that recently. It's because it's not just about the stats, it's about when you think about what a leader, what that really means, it's all of the intangible things as well, right? It's the emotional intelligence. It's the demonstrating empathy. It's leading in the gray. It's, your communication style and approach. It's being problem, resolution minded, right? And not just checking off the box and doing the task. It's more than just, hey, did I do all of the required things? You've got to almost think like a business owner. So I think it's the path of least resistance. Or what will happen is that they will um, lobby to get that individual promoted in another department, but they don't want to tell them,
Oh,
you know what I'm saying? That's
gotcha,
unfortunate.
gotcha.
It happens, man. People got to be honest with where people are. And if you're going to really develop people and give them the truth, you got to set them up for success and being honest and transparent and really assessing them. You got to do it. You got to give the hard message as a leader. That's a part of it.
What challenges did you face early on when you first started, Global Leadership Solutions?
That's a great question. And I'll say this, I am still in those early stages of it, right? If I go back, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit, but when I talk about my book and this evolution of how did I get the Global Leadership Solutions, and I liken it to conception to childbirth, right? So if you think about the actual conception of a child for 9 months, it's being incubated, right? It's being developed. You got to feed it all of the things. And so um, I've been doing that pretty much my career, but more specifically within the last 6 to 9 months, just really focusing in on the vision and the mission and what are we really trying to do. Just recently, over the last quarter, actually launching the Global Leadership Solutions brand. And 2024 is really, I'm still in the infant stages. But here's the thing. You think about the infant, but I'm really the parent of Global Leadership Solutions. So everything that I am is in it, even though it's at its infancy stages. And so all my experience as a leader and all of the development that I've done, I've mentored countless individuals over the years. I've developed individuals, helped get them promoted to supervisor, manager, director, even to VP level positions over this past 2 decades. So right now, I'm in the early stages of really branding it. My vision is to be global, in a sense, right? Because I recognize that we're living in a global economy. Um, and I'm not just trying to regulate myself just to, Houston or Texas or what have you. So I'm still in those early stages. But I think that to answer the question, the early stages was really getting out of my own head and just moving and having the courage just to push it out there. And I'm still in those early stages of really building out the brand, a few clients, but I'm not going to pretend like I'm over here doing, $500 million in coaching and
Not
consulting.
yet.
Not yet, right? Not yet.
Right, right.
But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the biggest hurdle, most people don't start. So
right.
the fact that you started, and like
Mhm.
you said, you're the parent of the company. So it's like all the things that people are out here trying to actually sell, you've already done. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? So it's a lot of marketing now.
It's a
That's what I
package
see
deal.
in my business.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've done the work. Now it's about marketing and networking and making sure that the right people can get exposed to you, your information, your book, your
Right.
trainings, things like that. So, yeah, it's a process for sure. So, next, I want to talk about like you talked about empowering the next generation of leaders, and I think that's definitely admirable and it's needed. So, what skills or like mindset is essential for leaders navigating, this evolving world that we're in? Because this is global leadership solutions, like you
Yeah.
said. So, what skills or mindset that you um, actually teach?
Yeah. So if you think about global, and I touch on this, a little bit in my book around you managing and leading across generations, right? So not just across generations, but across different cultures and environments, and just understanding and being able to connect with people on a human level, which is kind of an oxymoron with all of the AI technology that's out there, right? But I think the art of being able to connect with people is a trait or skill or characteristic that we need. So emotional intelligence, right? Are you we're data driven. We're in a data centric, data driven society. Are you using the data to drive decisions, or just the data driving you, right? You're not even thinking about the human capital, and you're just looking at a number. And everyone is sort of relegated to, this is what the number says, so that's who you are. So I think that emotional intelligence is critical to develop that skill. Also, empathy. I got to tell you, over the last decade or so, people, and if you look at social media and you look at just business and you look at politics and you just look at just a wide array of how people are dealing with each other, the fact that
Yeah.
we are not able to empathize with individuals, right? I'm not talking about feeling sorry for people, but as a leader, you've got to be able to express a certain level of empathy with your team. And again, that does not mean that you're not holding people accountable. That simply means is that I'm going to try to understand, where they're coming from. And I have, and this is a little teaser for you, my leadership code that I'm working on right now. And that lead stands for, are you listening to understand? Right? That L, listen to understand. The E, engage first, then educate. Right? A, anticipating needs. Right? And then D is developing people with data. So how are you using the information to develop Moses? Like, Moses, let's sit down and look at this data. Now, what do you see? And you use the data to develop, not to weaponize, right? So I think you've got to have that adaptability, inclusivity. So it's an array of things, but it's mostly around those people skills are necessary and needed in the next generation of leaders.
You talked about some of the skills that you need, and then, how are you equipping your leaders? So you
So
broke down your acronym for lead. But is there any other things that you want to point out on how you actually equip leaders with your company to actually grow these skills, or just other best practices?
Yeah. So first, I do have some signature trainings that I take my clients and my teams through. Um, I'm certified, a John Maxwell certified trainer, and so there's a few core curriculums that I walk people through, particularly leaders. The two main ones that I focus on is everyone communicates, few connect, and so it's a training that helps people to understand how we communicate, and it's not just your verbal, it's your nonverbal, and it's your actions. And so that's a 10-week a training. And then the other one is developing the leader within you. And so just walking people through uncovering that leader that's within them. And it's not, again, it's not just about managing to stats or KPIs. It's about really developing those core values and those core traits that are foundational for leaders to stand on. And so when you think about, when you ask, well, what do I put them through? It's getting back to that foundation. Like if you have a solid leadership foundation, then you can build all of those other things on top of it. So I take it back down to the basics of just how to connect with people individually and the human side of leadership.
Do you think everyone can be a leader?
Yeah, because listen, you're
Or
leading regardless, because leadership is about influence. You listen, you may not know that you're leading, but if someone is watching you and observing, you're leading. You may just not know that you're leading. You can lead someone down the wrong path, and you can help someone develop and go down the right path. But either way, you're leading. So I think everyone has leadership in them, whether they know it or not. It's just how you choose to use it. So I think everyone has some form of leadership in them. It's either leadership by action, leadership by, demonstration. But yeah, everyone has leadership in them. It's just how you choose to use it.
I agree with you with that. I mean, it's been competing viewpoints on whether or not if someone can be taught to be a leader, or you have to have that innate ability of being a leader. But I do feel like you have some natural abilities, but then there's
Right,
some things that people can just, shine up and say, wow, like you said, you're being a leader and not even knowing it. Just your influence.
right,
Even if you're doing something negative,
right,
it's still being a leader.
right.
So it's just about shaping your values to something positive so that your leadership can shed light to something that can produce something fruitful.
There's a science behind even that physicality, right? If you do certain things, you're going to see those incremental gains. And John Maxwell says that leadership is about influence. But listen, but not all influencers are leaders, or maybe they're not leaders in a positive light. You can influence people, like you said, for good or for bad. I'm choosing to
Yep.
focus on the good. How can I develop more leaders,
Good.
and we duplicate those efforts?
So let's talk about your book now. So it's the 6 C's of leadership.
Mhm.
Talk to us about those 6 C's. Take your time and break down those 6 C's, and ultimately, let us know why they're crucial for today's leaders.
Yeah. So this was a passion of mine. I'd been, just doodling over the years. Before I moved to Atlanta, I sort of really wrote these out as a developmental or training for my team, because we had reached a sort of a plateau. And I said, hey, well, we need to really anchor ourselves. And so how do we develop and get to the next level? And so the 6 C's of leadership was just over the years, the things that I did to really take over new teams, drive high performance teams. And then, as the book says, how do I gain commitment and buy-in early? Because sometimes people are resistant to change. And so I knew as I was promoted throughout my career, I said, these are the things that I always focused on, right? And the 6 C's are simply this: the culture. When you take over a new team or a new department, or you go to a new company, whatever the case may be, you've got to really understand what the culture is and what it was before you got there, right? And oftentimes new leaders have this, well, I'm gonna fix everything when I walk in the door mentality. And it just doesn't work like that, right? And so what I submit, and these are very practical things that we can think about, but what I submit is that when you go into an organization, you need to first focus on what the culture is of that team or that department or that organization. So that means you got to go listen. You got to ask questions. You got to try to understand, how did we get here? What was a leader like before you, right? Are people walking around with PTSD because the person before you was a tyrant, and everybody was uptight and nobody wanted to make any decisions? And so when you're in meetings and you're trying to get people to, step up, they don't do it. Well, did you realize before you arrived, when they stepped up, they got ridiculed, they got talked down to you, or their ideas were rejected. And so they're not willing to do that because they don't know where you're coming from. So I say you got to focus on the culture, understanding what happened before you got there, because there was a culture before you arrived. Once you talk about and understand the culture, then I move to the second C, which is communication. You've got to establish certain communication protocols and open up lines of communication. You got to get people talking to you, right? And again, what did I say? Get people talking to you, not you talking to them, right? So
Mm.
if you get people talking to you and you create a safe space where they can communicate with you, and you understand how they like to communicate, and you recognize that we've got multiple generations in the organization and they don't all communicate the same. You got baby boomers, you got Gen X, you got millennials, you got Gen Z. Listen, if we just talk about those four, how they
It's all over
communicate
the
is
place,
totally different,
right?
right? So you're trying to communicate with the Gen Z, and they're used to communicating like this, and they don't understand why you don't want to message them a certain type of way, or it's just got to understand where they're coming from, right? So I talk about communication, and then once we establish communication protocols, setting up proper cadences around how we communicate, how frequently we communicate, um, and you build that, and then you move into consistency. So I believe that as a leader, if I'm taking over a team and I've got 10 managers or 10 supervisors, if they're all doing 10 different things, we got a problem. No wonder the culture is the way it is. So I established off the bat that there will be consistency. Listen, and I say this, even if we're all doing it wrong, we all do the same thing, right? And so I just talk about the importance of being consistent, and then also being fair and consistent. So people don't have the idea that there is favoritism, within it. Well, one soup does it this way, another soup does it that way. So I established that, hey, we need to be consistent. If you wrote somebody up for this reason, then you got to be saying to yourself, well, I'm gonna hold the other person accountable exactly the same way. And then once we get those right, and there's trust built within the team, now we can start talking about collaboration. because before this team didn't collaborate, right? And so now there's a trust built, right? They know that I'm fair, I'm consistent. We've established how we're going to communicate. We're trying to change the culture together. Now we can collaborate on how we do that. Then once we collaborate and establish a culture of collaboration, then we can get into connecting. Now, connecting is my favorite because I feel like you got to connect with people before you can get them to buy into anything. And so when I talk about connection, it's about, well, Moses is not just a number. Hey, what's going on with Moses? Hey, how's your daughter doing? Hey, how was your weekend? Right? Sometimes I put and no, I don't want to talk about the stats right now. I'm just checking in. How's it going? You know what I mean? And so to me, that's got to be genuine and authentic, natural. So I believe that if you do those first five very well, then the last C is commitment, right? And those are the 6 C's. And I've used those everywhere I went. Quite honestly, it's in all my, anytime I've interviewed, I've talked about my 6 C's. When I come in, I'm going to focus on these things. And in most cases, it gets me at least in the final interview because everyone is challenged with it.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. It sounds so simple. If somebody's been in a leadership role, they know that to get through those 6 C's can definitely be a challenge for
Work.
sure. It's work. But that's what makes folks true leaders because you embrace that. Because you look at the opportunity to take on a team who has a shattered culture, and you think, wow, think about what this team will look like when we're at the calibration
Right.
and connected stage. You know what I'm saying? So if that doesn't really warm you up when you take on a new team, then that goes to that leadership mindset
Right. Right.
because it's work, but it's good work. You know what I'm saying? Like it's most people go to work and
Right.
it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Mm-hmm.
People just come in there, they're in survival mode, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you come to work and you feel like you want to have this state of belonging and you're getting beat up and you're not being listened to, and
Right.
then here comes this new guy coming in and he's full of energy. Like, who are you? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So it's so much work to
Yeah.
do. I think those 6 C's are great. Another thing I would just say that's kind of worked for me in my career is this is something leaders will come in and they look for like top performers, right? They
Mhm.
want to get the people that just blow it out the park and they want them on your team.
I know
What's
where you're going.
always worked for me, you know where I'm going? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Over here.
So, right. You got to go with the people because we talked a moment ago about the ICs that talk about the leaders when you're not around.
Yeah.
You need the person because you as a leader, you come in front of the team, you got this big speech, you thinking everybody's about to take these marching orders and do
Yeah.
this and do that. You want the person who has everyone's ear when they walk out that room. And a lot of times it's not the high performer.
Yeah.
Now, your best case scenario is a middle, it's a high performer or a middle performer,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's a low performer.
Yeah.
And what you got to do is you got to be able to find and identify that person through your connections because obviously that person is detached from the work, right?
Right.
Got to connect with them. And what I used to do is do things like, hey, James, I got this. You don't give any compromising
Right.
leadership
Right.
stuff, right? But you say, hey, James, I'm about to, give the team some important information.
Mhm.
Let me run it by you first and get
Right.
your
Right.
opinion. You know what I'm saying? I promise you, every time I used to do that with folks, their walls come down and I
Yeah.
start noticing so much buy-in from people because they're like, man, and who was that? That was James. Hey, I kind of like Moses. I think
Yeah.
Moses got our back. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So those are the things as a leader that it's easy to just say, I'm the boss, do it because I said do it, or else.
Right.
Or you can focus on this harmonious environment because one of the best things I love to do is when I take PTO and I come back and my team say, Moses, you didn't have to check email. You didn't
Right.
have to do
Right.
anything because they're working for me. They're working harder when I'm not there. And to get to that level, you got to do those 6 C's of leadership. You can't take shortcuts.
They want to work for you. right? And then
Yeah.
just make sure you drop me your address because I'm gonna send you something. But that is precisely the story or the example that I give. And I didn't mention it in my sort of description, but I'm always looking for who's that's, because there's a leader on this team and they have the
Yeah.
most influence. They're informal leaders, they're silent, but they have the biggest voice on the team. They will follow because it could be the most tenured person. It could be, and we don't know. Listen, what you have to understand is why are they being so vocal? What are they negative about? And if you haven't taken time to
Yeah.
understand that, hey, they've been overlooked for a position, they haven't really been developed. Maybe they weren't ready for the position and they never got it. And no one's ever told them, hey, Moses, let me tell you why you're
Yeah.
not getting promoted. This is what it is. And I'm working on something right now. It's really about your branding. This is my brain. I'm big on branding too. Going to put on a workshop on building a professional leadership brand because your brand and your reputation might be the reason why you're not getting the opportunities that you think you deserve. Because you're putting out, this is what my brand is. But in reality, your past behavior and actions is tied to your reputation. And so you don't even realize that you're being sabotaged because you got a reputation of being difficult to work with. And that may not even be the case. Maybe no one has taken the time to come talk to you about, Moses, what's going on, man? I mean, you've been in this role, and I do that all the time, Moses. Every time I go to a team, I'm asking, so you've been here for how long now? So did you apply for this job that they hired me externally for? Did you apply for it?
Yeah.
Because I go right at it. So tell me why don't you, what do you think it is? What do you think, what's preventing you from getting to the next level? And I show interest and I'm genuinely interested, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, when I'm trying to roll something out, I need them to be my biggest promoter, right? You talk about NPS, they will promote because they feel like, you know what, shoot, Moses took time to really try to listen and hear me out. And he rolled some
Yeah.
things by me and got my opinion and got my feedback. Nobody's ever listened to me. I've been telling them it's the same thing for the last 3 years and no one's ever listened. So
Right.
I think your approach and your strategy is right on. I do the same thing.
You touched on your John Maxwell training certification. I wanted to give you the floor a little bit just to make sure that you covered everything about that because I'm sure that's a prestigious honor and something to be very proud of. So, what all went into you getting certified, and what have you done with that certification since you've obtained it?
Yeah, so that was a goal that I set about 3 years ago. I said, you know what, I'm going to get the certification. I passed on it a few years ago when it was first presented to me, and it was just a personal goal. Part of it was my own personal leadership development, but I wanted to invest in myself. But also, it's kind of given me the foundation for my global leadership solutions and being able to teach that curriculum from John Maxwell. He's sold millions of leadership books, both in the Christian space as well as in the secular space. He's one of the most renowned leadership gurus out there. I mean, like I said, millions of books sold. After my certification, I'm able to teach certain, not all, but certain, curriculum that's within his program. And I use that as my foundation and my baseline for developing my leaders. I've taken my team, both of the ones that I mentioned earlier, or everyone communicates if you connect, and then developing the leader within you. So those are my two foundational programs because I think they're perfect programs for new or transitioning leaders. And so again, that was just a personal goal. Like I said, I've got all of the certifications that was offered through that. And it's just helped. It helped me personally develop. So that's why I did it for me first. And now I want to share with others some of the key learnings in the program or in those curriculum, I should say.
So, where do you see the future of leadership heading into this next decades?
So I think in terms of where leadership is going, I mean, when you look at, here's how I feel about leadership of the next generation. You have certain leaders that have not properly prepared the next generation to lead. And quite frankly, some people stay in leadership too long and they're
Uh,
damaging the opportunities for new leaders, new energy, new ideas to come into play. You can see that in politics. You can see that in the
sure.
old Baptist church. The senior
Mhm.
pastor 97 years old and is, not wanting to hand over the reins to the next generation. And so what I see in the most near future is that there's this tug of this pull. Those that are trying to hold on to leadership and power, and they're really holding on to the power of the leadership, right? Because if they were truly focused on leadership and succession planning, they would be gearing and preparing the next generation to lead us into that next phase. So I think where I want to put myself is wedge myself right in between the old guard and the new, right? And say, hey, listen, hey guys, we have to let this go. This is a young person's game. Let's equip them to lead well when we hand over the reins. And that's all succession planning is. I think there's got to be a releasing of control and power by the powers that be, right? So that the new generation come in and continue to get us to the next level. And so right now it's a war because some people don't want to let go. Technology is going to continue to advance and we have to embrace the technology. So we've got to be adaptable, right? So leaders have to know how to use the new technology. You can't be old school. It's not 82, right? You know what I mean? It's 2024. And there's certain technologies that we need to, adapt so that we can get to the next level. So I think we're at a very pivotal. I think that God's timing is always perfect. And I believe my positioning and focus on, really equipping or empowering next generation leaders is where I need to be with global leadership solutions so that we can have a proper handoff from the old guard to the new guard and that we don't lose. Because honestly, I hear people say all the time, man, we're in trouble. This next generation, they're just so focused on just social media. They're not, yeah, they can be though. We just have to take time and hear them out and invest in them. And then they'll get it. Because we weren't perfect when we were at those ages either.
That's definitely, a great mission
Sure.
and your vision. Is there any other goals that you have for global leadership solutions that you want to talk about?
Yeah, 2024, it's really about expanding on the foundation that's been built. I'm just really getting out more in terms of, like you said, the promotions and the marketing. I've got several events. We got an event this weekend that will be at here in Houston, 40-acre conference that's happening. And so it's about getting the brand out there and letting people know, hey, we're here to help, really kind of leadership coaching and consulting. If you have a team that it's new or you're small to mid-size, you don't really have the large, robust leadership training programs, then we can come in and fill in the gap for you and help develop your leaders so that you can take PTO and things will come crashing down when you're out of the office.
Your target market is the small to medium sized business.
Yeah, so small and mid-sized businesses, but then also aspiring entrepreneurs, because I believe that even entrepreneurs that are, I talk to people all the time, and I'm getting off this 9 to 5. Okay, great. You know what? Have your plan to get off your 9 to 5. So let's say your team, your business, it grows. Have you really taken time to invest in yourself and develop yourself as a leader so that you went from a team of 1 to a team of 20? Now, do you know how to lead those team of 20? And then also I talk about you can develop your skills even while you're on your 9 to 5, right? As you're investing and promoting your business. So what skills are transferable, while you're at a corporate gig that you can leverage and use in your entrepreneurial? So really about the mentoring and the coaching, how to build high performance teams and really grow your team and develop your team consistently so that you don't get 50 employees or 50 team members strong and you've done nothing to really set a foundation for how they lead. And then you're promoting your boy because he started with you and now he's leading a group of 10 and he has no leadership skills at all. I'm focusing my target at that small to mid-size and then entrepreneurs.
What advice would you give to other leaders or entrepreneurs that are trying to grow a brand that, if you knew this a few years ago, you would maybe be a little bit further along than what you are today? So what advice would you give a brand new entrepreneur at this stage of the game?
Yeah. I would say don't forget to invest in yourself. Don't forget that you are a brand and you are the brand. And so if you're trying to build your company brand, then there's got to be continuity and consistency between your personal brand. They cannot be diametrically opposed. Um, you've got to make sure that you've got brand consistency, right? So your character, your integrity, all of those things need to be in alignment. But I would say focus on developing yourself, and then do not, you know, cut corners when it comes to making sure that your team is solid and developed. The money is going to come, but you got to make sure you've got the right people around you and you've got the right people in position. And sometimes it's not always um, your best friend. You need skilled people in skilled roles and positions to really grow your business. And sometimes you just got to make tough decisions. So I would just say, just focus in on those key things and just don't forget them, because we can get caught up in, the rat race, the money and all of that. And then we get to a point to where our foundation is not solid and we can't hold up all that's being built.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Another thing, consistency. I
Yeah.
know it's one of your
The
C's,
C's.
but ooh, that's something I'm really want to focus on this year. Consistency
Yeah.
with my content, just with my brand. Just making sure when people think of leadership, they think of you. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that you want to be top of mind. If someone thinks of rental properties, I want them to think of me. Financial
Right.
education, I want them to think of me. So your brand has to constantly state that,
Right.
and just also starting. You know what I'm saying? Like
Mhm.
having an idea it's cool, but you have to actually put something into action.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but people run from a 9 to 5, but when you have a business, it's a 24/7. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? You gotta understand that. So, if you're not prepared to make those type of sacrifices when you're working on your content and you're working on your business plan and you're having, sessions with your team, or if you have your spouse that's involved, like mine, we have a family of businesses. So these are the things that people have to be willing to lean into and
Right.
know that that work will ultimately lead to success, but it just might not happen overnight. You know,
No,
it's a process.
no, you said it, man. The consistency, and I echo that as well. Being consistent with the content and making sure that that brand identity is clear to people, right? And it can't be you're this one day and then the next day you're doing this, and it's just you got to be consistent. And so, like you said, for me, when people think of me and Global Leadership Solutions, it shouldn't be a question of whether or not James is a premier leadership coach, a leadership mentor. Um, my name should be synonymous with leadership, and I've got to. I feel very confident that it is, but I've got to get more consistent with putting it out there. So so that's why I appreciate you bringing me on just to share. My goal is to do more of these, and then also to launch my Let's Talk Leadership Live podcast. I got a few things that I got to get done at Q1, and that's one of them.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's and so I
yeah,
was encouraged, dude. Quite honestly, I'll just share this with. I know we got to wrap up, but I was encouraged with just your professionalism, just your follow up, your follow through. We didn't go into our history. I'm proud of what you're doing. I remember
right.
2008, nine, or whatever it
Young
was.
pup.
Yeah,
Right.
young pup,
Yeah.
but always, very, consistent, poised. And so I'm proud of what you're doing, and just really encouraging. You encourage me, even to get, well, James, you gotta get some things in order, man. And we got the same last name, so I ain't got no
Oh,
excuses.
yeah, yeah. Oh,
So
man, I
that's fine.
appreciate it. I appreciate it so much, man. And you know, before I let you go, I mean, what final, thoughts or advice you might want to share with the audience, and also share, your website, how to reach you on social media. And I'll also include that in the show notes, but I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. So my social is James Nelson Leads. On Facebook, my is Global Leadership Solutions on Facebook, but on Instagram, it's James Nelson Leads. On TikTok, it's James Nelson Leads. On LinkedIn, it's Global Leadership Solutions.
I definitely appreciate your time. You know, you dropped several gems on leadership.
Appreciate
I personally seen it and witnessed it in action. You know, I'm happy to see that you're doing well. That was another great episode. So thank you again to James Nelson for coming on the show and sharing his invaluable insights, leadership expertise with us today. And to my listeners, make sure to visit mosesthementor.com for more empowering content. Don't forget to subscribe to Moses the Mentor on YouTube. So stay inspired and lead with confidence.